Hello, my name is Dr. Adam Dobrin, and I am your professor in International Criminal Justice Systems, CJE 4174. I hope you've gone through the syllabus and understand the expectations and requirements for this course. This first lecture will be a series of videos that I will be lecturing through. I will be showing the lecture as a document behind it, but you're going to need to listen to it as well. Throughout this lecture, I will be asking questions. Those questions are your graded quiz for this module. So I will be asking questions. I'm not going to just list them out so you can fake it, or I'm not going to do them all at the end so you can skip it. You have to watch and listen to this whole video, and throughout the video series will be a series of questions. You have to write down the answers and then submit them in the appropriate portal. Simple, easy peasy. Don't worry about it. If you watch the videos, the questions are actually very straightforward. Don't worry about it. Don't freak out. But if you don't watch the videos, they will be very difficult. All right, let's get started. Criminal justice system is sort of the starting point of this course. The foundation of looking at different criminal justice systems is we've got to look at what's the criminal justice system. Criminal justice systems really are pretty new historically, that for most of human history, or almost all of human history, there have not been criminal justice systems. It's only been in the past less than 300, more like 250 years or so, that there even have been what we consider criminal justice systems. It's difficult historically to look at them other than very, very recent history. If you consider human history is, however you want to look at it, 30,000 years long or 6,000 years long, the criminal justice systems have only been around for a blip, a blink of human history. Does that mean there has not been crime? It does not. There has always been crime. As long as you have people, you have crime. That's just a fact of humanity. Humans equal crime. But crime has historically been dealt with very differently than we deal with crime now, so there's no need for a criminal justice system. How was crime dealt with in the past? Well, let's explore that. There are two general forms of social control. Social control is how people's behavior is controlled, how groups of people regulate the behavior of others. The later type, the one that comes after the development of a lot of processes in human history, is called formal social control. That's the one that we're mostly interested in this course. But what preceded formal control for thousands and thousands of years was informal social control. It's easier to explain them out of historical order. Formal social control first, then informal social control. So we're going to be interested in formal in this class, but we're going to start with historically start with informal, but we're going to define formal because it's easier to define that first. Formal social controls are responses by formal organizations for violating formal rules. I throw that word formal out a lot. It's really not that complicated. Formal pretty much means written rules within an organization that has written policies and a written organizational structure. So formal social controls are if somebody breaks a rule in a formal organization, there's a formal response. Written. FAU, Florida Atlantic University, is a formal organization. There are written rules, written organization, written contracts, and so on. And so there are formal sanctions, formal responses to things like plagiarism, not paying your tuition on time, parking violations, all of those. Those are formal rules that if broken, there are formal responses for them. Your place of employment, they have dress code policy written, they have attendance policy written, they have late policy written, so and if you violate any of those policies, they have the sanctions, the responses written, and they will respond to them. The formal rules that we're most interested in this class, obviously, are laws. They're the written formal rules for government. Again, by no means are these the only formal rules and the only types of formal organization. This is not a history of law course. It would be a very interesting addition to spend a couple of weeks looking at the history of law, but it's far beyond the constraints of this course. But we do need to recognize that laws have not always been around. Groups of people have always had rules that govern their behavior. As long as people have been living in a communal setting, tribes, clans, families, whatever that communal group is, there have been rules which are informal. You have informal rules with your communal setting, your family, your dormitory, your apartment that you share with 2 other people, whatever it is, you have rules there. Those are informal. Law is a later development. Law implies some sort of formal rule that is written and standardized. Norms are flexible traditions, oral perhaps, but not written and codified. So to have law, there are 2 things that are absolutely necessary before law can exist. You need to be able to write, and you need a government. Without either of those, you can't have law. It seems pretty self-evident now that I said it, but had you thought about it, you might not have come up with both of those. You need those 2 things for there to be law, writing and government. All the other types of rules that exist without writing and without government are more informal rules or norms or taboos or something like that. They're not technically law. So that's formal. Formal social control is the response of violating formal rules by a formal entity. We're mostly interested in this course in the formal response of government of the rules on law. Straightforward. Informal social control, informal sanctions are the responses by informal groups for violating informal rules. These groups can be your friends, your neighbors, your family, your classmates, etc. A lot, if not most or all of our everyday behavior is guided by informal social control, informal sanctions. What would happen if someone in class talked a lot during class? Assume we're in a classroom setting, not online. If it bothers you, then you give the person dirty looks, you tell them to shut up, etc. That's informal. Now, if the instructor cites formal FAU policy about class disruptions, then that is a formal response. So responses are not always either formal or either informal. They can be both. So an informal response is sort of the dirty look of your classmates for you talking. A formal response is the professor responding using the policy rules of the student handbook. You go to a very nice restaurant in t-shirt and shorts. Now, in South Florida, that's not always the same. People dress crazy down here. But in the real world, the other people will look at you like you're a cretin, like you're not civilized. Every situation that you're involved in socially has certain rules. And if you violate them, you'll receive some sort of sanction. It does not have to be severe. It could be a look of disapproval. It could be a tisk, tisk, tisk. There's a huge range of informal social control responses. You get in an elevator, and when you get in, you don't turn around to face the front. You stay facing the back. That's a violation of norms. There's all these unwritten rules that you're aware of that you didn't even know you're aware of. You go in an elevator, you stay facing the back. What happens? Nothing serious happens. It's just people will take a step away from you. They might giggle a little bit, but it's not normal for you to stay looking at the back of an elevator. So there's informal responses. The lowest level of informal social control is shame and embarrassment. This is an extremely powerful control device, but it is not the only one informal social control uses. Responses can range from shame all the way up to death. In fact, one researcher, a guy named Donald Black, says that murder is better understood as informal capital punishment, that killers kill people as a mechanism of punishment. So don't think informal social control is just embarrassment. Embarrassment is absolutely critical. It's crucial, important. It's what guides most of your behavior, is that you don't want to be embarrassed. There's plenty of people in this world who don't care if they're embarrassed, and that's where problems start. Or they don't care if they bring shame to their family, or they embarrass their community. That's where problems start. But once you have a strong bond to people, your family, your community, you don't want to embarrass yourself or embarrass them, so that really, really restricts your behavior. But there was lots of responses in pre-law societies. There was lots of capital punishment, lots of executions, lots of excommunications, lots of corporal punishment, physical punishment, branding, whipping, dismemberment, that sort of stuff. And that was all informal social control. But a modern researcher says that if you think about it, murder is informal social control. Most murder, not all, but most murder is someone has committed a wrong or a perceived wrong, and the killer responds to that, that you in some way have committed a wrong, and they're going to punish you for that wrong. That's informal social control. Very few murders are outside of that description. A murder for hire or something like that. The actual killer isn't righting wrong, but the person who hired them is, for the most part. So again, not 100%, but very, very high numbers of murders are informal social control. If a police officer kills someone legitimately and legally in the line of duty, that's formal social control. So just because someone's killed doesn't mean it's informal. Or if the state executes somebody, that's formal social control. There are a lot of informal sanction devices. Shame embarrassment's the base. The problem is the person who needs to be able to feel the shame and embarrassment, they need to care that they're being shamed. Some people don't. Reality stars. And you can go to prisons and ask a lot of people there if they care, if they're embarrassed, if they care, if they hurt their community's feelings. And you're going to have elevated numbers of people who don't care. Now, which is more powerful, informal or formal social control? It seems like formal would be more powerful. Law for crime and then prison and so on, but it's not. This is important. Formal social control is needed only when informal social control breaks down. It's really important. I'm going to repeat it. Formal social control is needed only when informal social control breaks down. I'm going to take a quick pause here for question number 1 of your quiz. Question number 1. So you can pause this video. I know you're able to do that. I'm going to read the question. And you're going to answer it, and you have to switch back and forth between your word processor or your paper or however you're writing the answer down, and then come back to the video. But question number 1, very simple. Define formal social control. Define formal social control. You may give an example, but giving an example is not the question. The question is define formal social control. Pause for a second. And now I'm going to continue. That was question 1. Now, again, there was no formal criminal justice system until about 250 years ago, but there was crime. There was also very strong informal mechanisms to deal with crime, which deteriorated in the mid-1800s. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, why it deteriorated. Let's say you had the opportunity to steal something. You're paying for gas inside the gas station. I know you probably pay at the pump. Bear with me. And the clerk turns around for a second. You could have taken a candy bar, but you didn't. Why not? Is it the threat of formal social control? What would happen formally if you got caught and the police were called and you were arrested and processed and so on? Probation maybe, small fine, not the end of the world. You're not getting arrested. You're not going to jail. They're going to write you a notice to appear at court, and it's minimal, unless you have a huge record. But what if your parents found out, or your friends, or your boss? What if you need to apply for a graduate school or a job and they ask you about arrests or convictions? They always do. That's pretty embarrassing. So the bigger reason why you, a college student, are less likely to steal something in your day-to-day life isn't the threat of getting arrested. It's the threat of having to deal with the shame and the embarrassment of the event. The key to informal social control is the strength of the ties to the group sanctioning you. If you care about how that group thinks about you, and if you're close to them, then those responses are very powerful. If you don't care and you're not close to them, then they have much less of an impact. Would you think that informal social control works better in a small town where everybody knows each other and are similar to each other, or in a big anonymous city with lots of diversity? And so that's why throughout history, informal was so powerful, is that in most of history, people lived in these small towns where everybody was very similar to each other, same religion, same background, same ethnicity, same language, same everything. And again, in small towns, people are really bonded to each other. There's no anonymity. You're related to each other. Everybody knows your mom, your dad, your family. And so your reputation is very powerful and potent. And what you care the other people think is very powerful and potent as well. This video has 15 minutes. We're at 14 and a half, so I'm going to pause it now and start over in a bit.